So here's the plan. The plan is I am going to read out some questions for atheists that I found online that I haven't previewed. So they're going to ambush me, whoever wrote these. And I'm going to tell you what I think. These questions for atheists are all over the place by Christians who seem to honestly believe that we have not heard these a million times before. And they all seem to be variations on the same thing, so I'm not going to worry too much. There might be a lot of repetition, there might not. It could be very short. Podikasata, as they say in Japan, they call these things podikasata. Or a very long one, depending on how much I want to talk about it. What's wrong? Sorry, just a dog. What? I have a dog. We got a rescue dog. He's called Charlie. He doesn't know he's called Charlie. I don't think he knows. It's just whoever has the food. That's who's calling his name, right? Yeah? You can call him Giraffe as long as you're holding a bit of food. Is that right? Giraffe. I'm not even sure he's a dog. He looks like a sheep. A little sheep gone wrong. He's a Bichon Frise. The most comical of the ridiculous dog breeds. But he was a rescue. When you get a rescue, there are a whole bunch of decisions you do not get to make. So let's go. Also, I still have diabetes. Oh yeah, diabetes update. Ba-dum, bam, ba-dum, bam. Diabetes update. I got the results back. I could have rung up 3 weeks ago to get my results, but I don't know what to do with that information. So instead, I've made an appointment with my doctor and told him. So I've gone from 120 blah 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 to 70 blah blah blah, and that's better because you're aiming towards 50 blah blah blah. So I'm on the track to being totally cured of this thing. Well, not cured, but totally managed. And my cholesterol is gone back to normal for whatever reason, so I don't have a cholesterol problem anymore. So that's all good news. That's the end of diabetes update. Diabetes update. Da 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 da. Diabetes update. Dude, you all need to calm down. Sorry, the dog, sheep thing. Where are we? Questions. Oh yeah, I had the file open here. You're destroying the magic of production by telling them everything you're doing. Yeah, I had a file open. Whatever, sue me. I like to prove it, prove it. I like to prove it, prove it. I like to prove it, prove it. You like to prove it. That's essentially the atheist position. Okay, here we go. Is atheism a lack of belief in God or a belief that there is no God? Some atheists would say they just don't have a belief in a God. I don't think there's not many atheists who would definitely say that there isn't any God, because it's hard to say things for certain. Well, you can pretty much live your life and make all your decisions as if there were no God, and there will make zero difference. Like, it's hard to say that there's no anything. Like, think of a fictional thing. The one atheists use is invisible pink unicorns, which seems to drive Christians crazy. They really don't like that invisible pink unicorn thing, even though it's precisely exactly the correct example to use. How would I prove that there is no invisible pink unicorn? Like, how would I even... What methodology would I use to prove that to you? But you can live your whole life as if there wasn't any and everything's fine. Okay, here we go. Number 2, if God exists, would you become a Christian? Not necessarily. If God exists, which God? The Christian, if the Christian God exists, would I become a Christian? I suppose in the sense that I believed he existed, if I believed he existed. But there's still a whole lot of other stuff, along with the fact that the bare fact that God exists isn't enough. The God in the Christian Bible, the Jewish Bible and the Christian Bible, seems to have a bunch of opinions about things and a way of enforcing those opinions that I do not agree with. So I think even if there was a God and he lined up with the Christian Bible version of the God, there's a lot of explaining to do. Like, I'm not in favour of genocides, and I certainly wouldn't have wiped out the entire population of the planet with a flood. And that's contrary to my values. Genocide. And I would regard that as relatively uncontroversial, that genocide would be against my values. But if you're agreeing with your God, then you're going to have to... Here's a lot of explaining to do. Oh, I had to kill everyone on the planet because they were bad people. Well, there's lots of bad people, and I'm still not going to kill them. Even people we convict for really horrible crimes like murder and so on, we don't even kill them. Not in this country. We just put them in jail at some point. Yeah, well, I think most Christians are morally superior to the God they claim to worship, just given his behaviour in the past. If you can believe that, I mean, you could say that there is a God existing and he's nothing to do with that. He's got a different character altogether. Maybe. I don't know. Need more research. More research required. Question number 3. How do you determine what's right and what's wrong? Well, I'll tell you what I don't do. I don't consult a God that doesn't exist and ask his opinion. Because as I said, we'll start with something pretty easy. Genocide goes against my values. And the God in the Bible appears to be okay with genocide. And I'm not. So, am I wrong? Am I right? I think basically, as a species, we form communities as humans. And our community values that we use to promote the well-being of the community and the success of the community turn into these abstract qualities of right and wrong. Because there isn't any right or wrong. You have to decide that. Like, there's nothing right or wrong in the universe. Like, even the worst thing like even a genocide, that's not wrong in a sense of abstract wrong. It just, as I said before, it's not consistent with my values. I wouldn't use the word wrong about that. I just want to have nothing to do with it, and I'm very much against it. The implication of the question is that if you don't know what's right and what's wrong, that you have to use God as your standard or whatever, and that's just total rubbish. Christians use the same method to determine right and wrong that atheists do, but Christians think they're doing it for religious reasons, but they're not. They're doing it for the same reasons atheists do, because very religious people down through history have all had completely different impressions of what counts as right or wrong. Like, Christians all the way up into the mid-19th century felt that their position on slavery, which was it's okay to have slaves, was justified by Scripture. And now, those same Christians think that their position on slavery, and most of them now are against slavery in their defense, is also justified by Scripture. So it seems to me that they've evolved at the same speed as everyone else, for the same reasons as everyone else, but they think it's religion and it's not. So how do you determine what's right and wrong? The same way everyone else does. An evolving set of community values. Question number 4. How do you deal with guilt and sin in your life? I don't accept the doctrine of sin. I don't think there is anything I could do. Sin is a thing that's offensive to God, right? But not necessarily morally wrong or anything, just offensive to God. Like one of the commandments is don't say the Lord of your name in vain. Right? So if I say Jesus a few times and it's in vain and I'm not actually calling him or praying to him or whatever, that would be in vain, and that's a sin. But I don't think that's not really hurting anyone, so I don't accept that. How do I deal with guilt and sin in your life? Guilt? I don't know. Guilt is something that affects everyone, I guess. You do something stupid and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I guess you just accept it, that this is what happened, and you move on, and you try to learn from it, and you try to do better the next time. That's how I deal with guilt. And in my case, it happens at lightning speed. It happens in about 4 seconds. I don't really do guilt, but if I do, it's a very short-lived thing, because I want to take that energy and use it in a positive way to push everything forward. Because guilt is like, should have done this, should have done that, yeah, but like, what's this doing for me? Why? This isn't, like, if I did something horrible to someone and I shouldn't have done it, whining to myself about it, it's more self-pity than actually helping anyone or feeling bad about it. I don't want to do that. Waste of my time, waste of everyone's time. Here we go. Do you act according to what you believe or according to what you lack in belief? I act according to the set of values that we agree upon as a community. That's a similar question to the one. I knew there'd be repetition. How do you know what's right and what's wrong? Do you act according to what you lack in belief? I don't think you can act according to what you lack in belief. So, but if you don't believe in a God, you wouldn't be using anything goddish to determine any of your actions anyway. So that's a tautological question. Here we go. Next one. Can you prove how the universe was created? No, I cannot prove how the universe was created. That was easy. Can you prove that God does not exist? No. No. And that is also easy. No, it's not easy, but it's a stupid question. The reason it's a stupid question is the way they've framed the question is, can you prove that God does not exist? That implies that if you can't prove that God doesn't exist, first of all, it implies that if you can't prove that God doesn't exist, then maybe he does. And secondly, it implies that asking the question, can you prove that God does exist, is the same sort of question, which is not. It just has the same grammar and the same word order, roughly speaking, but that one word not changes into a completely different proposition. For the same, it's the invisible pink unicorn thing again. Can you prove that the invisible pink unicorn does not exist? No. Can you prove that it does exist? No. But the fact that you can't prove that it does exist means a lot more than the fact that I can't prove it doesn't. And I'm not sure how to explain. Like that's logically, that's kind of obvious. Like, it should be much easier to prove that something exists if it does exist than the impossibility of proving that it doesn't exist if it doesn't exist. Like, if something doesn't exist, it's almost impossible. I would say pretty much impossible to prove that it doesn't exist. Anything at all you can think of. But if something does exist, it's a simple matter. Just think of 10 random things that exist. Now, think of how you would prove it. There's a glass of Coke. Not Coke. What do you call it? Diet Coke. No, not Diet Coke. Coke Zero. That's the one. Black Coke. It's in a black thing. Here's a bottle of Coke Zero. I believe that this bottle of Coke Zero exists. Here we go. If you could see me, you'd say, oh yeah, there it is. There he is there, right? Now, if there's a frog flavour of Coke, which there isn't anywhere. Giraffe flavour. How do I prove that there is not a giraffe flavour of Coke? How would I prove that? There's no bottles of it anywhere. Okay, but how do I prove that? Ring up the company. Have you ever made giraffe Coke? No. Maybe they made a mistake. Maybe they missed it. You know, you could kind of make up reasons for any of those things. But to prove that it does exist, all you have to do is just point to a bottle and say, there you go. Done. So they're not the same kind of question at all. They just sound like they are. And it's a word game, is what that is. It's not a genuine question. It's a word game. It's a grammatical game. And if I give the answer that I can't prove it doesn't exist, it will be taken as a victory rather than an opportunity to discuss the thing. Because a lot of these questions they're not invitations to discussions at all. They're just trying to promote an agenda. There's a word for that. Tendentious is the word for something that looks like it's trying to make a point, but is actually just promoting an agenda. So can you prove that does not exist is a tendentious question, and as such, it doesn't mean anything, and I don't feel any responsibility to answer it. Although I will, and the answer is no, I can't. But that doesn't mean anything. You think that means something if you're a Christian, but it doesn't mean anything at all. Here we go. Do you know where you're going when you die? Yeah, nowhere. I'm going to rot in the ground. Okay, that was the preliminary few questions. Now, I also downloaded another one, and I haven't looked at this one either. But I don't know how long this has been going on for, but it hasn't been going on for the regular amount of time, so I'm going to keep going. Keep going till somebody stops you. That's the motto, right? Maybe not in the Pentagon or biohazard places, but anywhere else, just keep going till someone stops you. Questions for Atheists. Number 1. Are you absolutely sure there is no God? If not, then is it not possible that there is a God? And if it is possible that a God exists, can you think of any reason that would keep you from wanting to look at the evidence? Well, now, for one question, that's a lot of questions, right? Are you absolutely sure there is no God? No, I'm not. If not, okay, here we go, this applies to me. Then is it not possible that there is a God? Yes, it is possible. And if it is possible, can you think of any reason that would keep you from wanting to look at the evidence? No. Please present your evidence. I ask Christians this the whole time. Not Christians, anybody. I'll take Allah people. What do you call Allah people? Muslims. Anyone. Hindus. And what I say is the same thing, because Daddy doesn't have all day. So I say, give me your single best reason why anybody who doesn't live inside your mind should think there's a God. Right? Your best single reason why anybody who doesn't live inside your mind should think there's a God. Right? That's what I call evidence. But I only do one at a time. Single, meaning one piece of evidence, and the reason I'm outlining these is because I've gotten answers that don't seem to respect the 3 very simple conditions I've put on it. Single, best, right? Best meaning what you think is the best reason. The reason is because so far I've had no problem whatsoever in demolishing it. And if that's your best reason, I obviously don't need to see any of the other not as good reasons if I've demolished your best reason. That's the only reason I do that, is to save everybody time. And the third bit is anybody living outside your head. The reason I do that is because religious people sometimes have a lot of feelings. And I feel that God this, and I feel that God that, and I prayed for this, and this happened, and so on. That's all stuff that only makes sense if you already believe and you're inside your mind. And if something makes sense only from inside your mind, then that's no good to me as a piece of evidence, or anyone. You know, scientists don't go with new antibiotics and say, well, I have a feeling this works. You know, they don't even go and say, I ran a trial and it works. They still have to go through a whole other process where other people do trials and try to disprove it. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for a bunch of people to disprove it. You're asking me to adopt a position on a theory where I'm specifically opening my mind to look for evidence of the thing, when what you should be doing is looking for evidence that it's not true. And not because I'm an atheist, but do this for everything. For everything. You should be looking for reasons it's not true. Taking the example of the scientist who said these are new antibiotics, they can sort out infections in half the time. And he prints it up and the newspaper does a story on it and it's great. Your first reaction, not just as a doctor or a biologist person or an antibiotics person, but as a human being, should be, wait a minute. Did he do this right? Did he do that right? I hope they run a bunch of new trials to test it and look for holes in it. You know, you don't just grab onto it because you like it. But that's what they're asking me to do. That they like this God idea so much because they believe in it. Their position is, oh, why aren't you going around looking for evidence for it? Why haven't you opened your mind for it? Because my first response is to trash it. Because that's my first response to everything, and that's how we develop knowledge. We don't develop knowledge by finding things in favour of our theories. That's a ludicrous suggestion. And it sounds like it's not ludicrous because once you believe something, you're in the pit, and that's all you can see. But for everything, your first response should be to try and trash it. Try and cook up a bunch of reasons why it couldn't possibly be true. And you're asking me to do the opposite here, to look for evidence. No, forget that, man. I mean, I will look at any evidence you have, but I haven't seen anything at all. That was my question. And a bunch of people have tried to answer it. A bunch of people have given me what they have assured me is their single best reason why anybody not living inside their mind should believe in a God. And they've all been weak. You know? I mean, I know I'm sounding like it's a triumphalist thing, like I'm in the ring battling them and so on. Yay, I have defeated them. But it's not about that. It's about presenting an argument that makes sense, and they haven't even, none of it's even been remotely convincing. Now, I understand if you already believe, then yeah, sure, those arguments work. But if you already believe, you don't need any arguments. You see, that's what I mean by outside your head. It's difficult. I know it's difficult when you believe something to try and imagine what it's like to not believe and what kind of evidence, standards of evidence you'd accept in that case. But so far, nobody's met the challenge. Question number 2. Oh, we're on question 2 already, folks. Folks, sorry, there's only one. Matty is the only person who listens to these. Hi, Matty, how are you doing? Would you agree that nothing cannot produce something? And if so, then if the universe did not exist but came to exist, wouldn't this be evidence of a cause beyond the universe? Okay, let's have a look. This is another question that looks like it's phrased logically, but is total horseshit. Would you agree that nothing cannot produce something? Well, nothing can produce something, in a way that I will explain in a second, even though nobody gives a shit. But this is something you can Google. Anyway, if so, then if the universe did not exist but came to exist, wouldn't this be evidence of a cause beyond the universe? Yeah, I guess. But then that doesn't help, because if the universe was created, like, there's no reason to think that it was, in the sense of an active creation rather than something that just kind of happened. But if the universe was created, then you have another problem, because, like, where did that creation force come from? If in your mind it's a God, then where did that God come from? And inevitably, the answer comes back, oh, that God created himself. Which seems, it's just illogical. It just doesn't make any sense unless you already believe it. But if you don't believe it, it's just nonsense. If your starting position is everything has to have had a creator at some point, or everything happens as a result of something else, then what happened that the universe was a result of? And they answer God, ha ha ha. And all you can say back is, well, what happened so that the God was a result of it? And they say, oh no, that's different. Like, I'm sure it is different. If you're a religious person, I'm sure it is. But again, I'm not inside your mind. You're going to have to do better. Do better, okay? However, the first part of the question is, would you agree that nothing can produce something? And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that something can come out of nothing, which is based around antimatter and matter particles that are constantly creating each other and destroying each other to produce nothing. And if it's complicated, it's how Stephen Hawking discovered Hawking radiation, which is something that black holes give off. And black holes are not famous for giving off anything at all. They're famous for the opposite, for sucking things in. But if these protons and antiprotons zip in and out, and one of them is on the event horizon and it goes into the black hole, the other one spins out, and that's new matter from nothing, from a vacuum. So it is possible for something to come from nothing. Now, how that relates to the creation of the universe, I have no idea, but that's not the question you asked. The question you asked is, would you agree that nothing cannot produce something? No, I wouldn't, based on things we know about the universe, and it makes sense, really, when you think about it. You shouldn't have to think about it, because it's there. But again, your first response to that Hawking radiation should be to trash it, as I know it's rubbish, to poke holes in it. Look it up, Google it. Sure, trash it all you like. That's how we'll find out whether it's true or not. Next question. Would you agree with me that just because we cannot see something with our eyes, such as our mind, gravity, magnetism, the wind, that this does not mean that it doesn't exist? Right. Okay, I know where this is going. I can't see my mind with my eyes, or I can't see gravity, or magnetism, or the wind, but I can see the effects of them, and it's pretty clear that if I drop something onto the ground, that this is consistent with everything we know about the theory of gravity. Like, it all makes sense. It's predictable. There's nothing predictable about a God. There's no theory of a God. There's no explanatory matrix around a God. It's just God there. Magnetism. Again, magnetism and the wind, they have theories and predictable predictions. The best kind of predictions I find are predictable ones. The predictions you can make about how they're going to act. And they're right. I suppose the mechanism of action. You understand the mechanism of action for gravity and of magnetism in the wind. And if you understand the mechanism of action, then you have a theory. It either works or it doesn't. And for those it does. Now, the first one, it said the mind. The human mind, if it does have a mechanism of action, we certainly don't understand it yet. But I don't think it's possible that the human mind is not a thing. It's not like that it doesn't have a mechanism of action. It's just a series of processes. It's possible. I don't know. I think it's a bit tricky when you get into things about the mind. But I don't know. If you can't see something, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So yeah, just to go with question number 4, that's fair enough. Would you also agree that just because we cannot see God with our eyes, it does not necessarily mean He doesn't exist? No, but I've never said that one of the reasons I don't believe in a God is because I can't see Him with my eyes. What I've said is that there's no evidence for the God. Any God. So I feel that those 2 questions were wasted on me. But as I said, I didn't scan these questions beforehand. I just copy and pasted them in and wrote them out. I would have cut these out if I had scanned it beforehand. Here we go. Number 6. In light of the Big Bang evidence for the origin of the universe, is it more reasonable to believe that no one created something out of nothing, or someone created something out of nothing? Oh, Jesus, hang on. That no one created something out of nothing, or someone created something out of... It's reasonable to believe wherever the evidence goes. And the evidence does not go to someone creating something. There's no evidence for that. I mean, I'm sure that, again, if you already believe in a God, that question, I'm sure, makes perfect sense, and you can just say, oh no, it has to be someone who created it. That's fine. You know? That's fine. But I don't believe, so that question is meaningless. I'll believe whatever the evidence points at. And of course, new evidence means that your conclusion might change, and then I'm going to have to change what I believe. That's fine too. You see, religions have no error correction mechanism. There's no internal error correction mechanism in religion. And that's the death knell. It means they're 400 years behind everybody else. Like Pope John Paul II, he forgave the Jews in like 2001 or something. Like, thanks very much. And he apologized for millennia of abuse and anti-Semitism and a culture of anti-Semitism that pretty much led up to the Holocaust. Sorry about that, lads. And then while that was happening, it was almost a function of the Catholic Church, Nazi Germany, because they were all Catholics. But hey, they're fighting the communists, right? They're fighting the atheists, so... And they're dealing with the Jewish problem, so let's leave them alone, yeah? Amazing how values change. Oh, one of them, the PR guy, what's his name? I can't think. Goebbels. Joe Goebbels was the only top Nazi to be excommunicated by the Vatican, and he was excommunicated not for any of the horrific crimes or human rights abuses, but because he married a Protestant. So, as Christopher Hitchens said, they do have some standards. Next question. If it takes an intelligent being to produce an encyclopedia, then would it not also take an intelligent being to produce the equivalent of 1,000 sets of an encyclopedia full of information in the first one-celled animal? Even atheists such as Richard Dawkins acknowledge that the amoeba have as much information in their DNA as 100 encyclopedias. Yeah, he does. Richard Dawkins does say that amoebas have a lot of information, but he doesn't say that it would take an intelligent being to do that. So I feel like you've missed the whole point of that. If it takes an intelligent being to produce an encyclopedia, you're talking about evolution, how things were evolved. The first one-celled animal. Well, that would have been amoebas. They would have evolved up from simpler things, I guess, from just strands of RNA and DNA. That's just a theory of evolution. Like, I can't go through how evolution works, but that would appear to be your answer. Just Google it. Theory of evolution. And I'll explain that. Whole load of data that nobody wrote. It just kind of popped up as a result of survival and random mutations. Random mutation plus natural selection equals making complicated stuff out of simple. That's pretty much it. Here we go. Number 9. If an effect cannot be greater than its cause, since you can't give what you do not have, then does it not make more sense that the mind produced matter than matter produced the mind, as atheists say? Well, that depends on what you think is greater, doesn't it? As I said, the mind might just be a series of processes. An emergent property of a series of processes, and if it is, then sure, why not? Why wouldn't it? Because, well, mainly the alternative that you want me to consider is that God did it. And that's just ludicrous. That doesn't explain anything. That has zero explanatory value. There's no theory, there's no mechanism of action, it doesn't explain anything. Just saying God did it. There, now you can stop thinking. Stop thinking? Boy, is that ever not my jam. Stop thinking. God did it. There you go. Well done. Say your prayers. No, man. No. Here we go. Number 10. Is there anything wrong anywhere? If so, how will we know unless there is a moral law? Yeah, you decide what's wrong as a community. Like I said above, your morals are your agreed upon values of whatever community you're in. Even now, in different communities around the world, there's different understandings of what counts as wrong. And in the future, we're doing things now that in the future our descendants are going to regard as horrific. Like, I think in the future people are going to think that eating meat is just horrific. Barbaric. How could they do it? They must have known. How could they know? How could they do that? They must have known. They had all the information they needed. You know? I might be wrong, but I can tell you this, we're definitely going to change our values. And in the future, there are still going to be people saying things like this. How can we know unless there's a moral law? The moral law is our community values that we've decided as a community, as a chunk of humans, are going to advance us in a certain direction. And make sure we can look after ourselves. That's it. Here we go. If every law needs a lawgiver, does it not make sense to say a moral law means a moral lawgiver? No. It's a sense of an emergent process of community values. That's what morals are. Like, you don't... Imagine if that wasn't true. Imagine if your moral law was from God. and God said, don't kill anybody, and the only reason you didn't go around murdering was because God told you not to, is that not disturbing? Like, I don't go around killing people, but not because God told me not to. It's just not, it's not consistent with my values, or the values of any community I would expect. They've managed to come around to that on their own. It's ludicrous. If every law needs a lawgiver. It's just, you're thinking about it in terms of very strange comparisons. Would you agree, the next silly question, I'm guessing, would you agree that if it took intelligence to make a model universe in a science lab, then it took a super intelligence to make the real universe? No. No. I would not agree that. I think simulating natural processes is very difficult. And the natural processes just sort of happen. Like trying to predict the weather is a nightmare. You can't get more than 3 days in advance in a climate like ours, which is temperate. Like in California, you can say it's going to be sunny for the next 9 months and you're probably going to be alright. But in Ireland, you have to make models of it. The models are extraordinarily complex. And they're always wrong. But you're modelling things like wind speed and humidity and temperature and all that kind of thing, and how they interact. And it's all quite complicated, but the things themselves are not really complicated, they just kind of happen. The wind just blows from high pressure areas to low pressure areas. There's nothing complicated about it. We're trying to model it as a nightmare. So no, I don't agree with that either. Question number 13. Would you agree that it takes a cause to make a small glass ball found in the woods? Maybe, yeah, probably. Or would you agree that making the ball larger does not eliminate the need for a cause? Okay. If so, then doesn't the biggest ball of all, the entire universe, need a cause? I guess, if you like, yeah. 14. If there is a cause beyond the whole finite, limited universe, would not this cause have to be beyond the finite, namely non-finite or infinite? If there's a cause beyond the whole finite universe, I guess, by definition, yeah. If there's something outside the universe, then it's non-universe stuff. I guess, maybe, I don't know. Maybe still something outside the universe could also be finite. I don't know. This is all highly speculative stuff that I have no idea if it's true or not, and it doesn't matter to me. It certainly doesn't matter to any of my reasons for being an atheist. 15. In the light of the anthropic principle, that the universe was fine-tuned for the emergence of life from its very inception, wouldn't it make sense to say that there was an intelligent being who pre-planned human life? Holy shit. In light of the anthropic principle, that the universe was fine-tuned for the emergence of life from its inception. Well, now that's a very peculiar thing to say, isn't it? Imagine thinking that the universe is fine-tuned for life. Imagine thinking that, when 99% of it is not just bad news for humans, but instantly fatal to all forms of life. Think about it. This is just our solar system. Over 99% of just our solar system is instantly fatal to all forms of life. And there's universes out there, and we haven't yet found any kind of life anywhere else. So we're just getting more and more evidence that that's a stupid, horseshit opinion, that the universe was fine-tuned for life. The universe, if anything, just based on the evidence, the universe was fine-tuned to kill everything. The universe was fine-tuned to make sure that no life comes up everywhere, and just hope that whoever created it hasn't spotted this tiny little corner where we are, because it seems to be going against the trend. If that's your argument, that the universe was fine-tuned by a creator, it was fine-tuned for instant death of everything, and let's hope they don't ever find us. Just stay quiet, stop sending out your little signals there. It's just a really, really bad opinion that the universe was fine-tuned for life. Clearly not. Even this planet isn't really fine-tuned for life. Because there's huge chunks of it where you can't grow anything to eat. Deserts, huge areas, and sea areas that you really can't live on either. If you're stuck out in the sea, you're going to die. So even on this planet, there's no real reason to think that this planet was specifically fine-tuned for human life. But certainly not the universe. The universe was fine-tuned. If it was fine-tuned by anybody, it was fine-tuned to be instantly fatal to all forms of life. that we are aware of. I feel like I have to put that at the end because there's always one, isn't there?
You don't know about different forms of life.
That's true. That's true. Well, let's just deal with the things that I do know. That's it. That's the last question. I also have a little paragraph down here that I must have accidentally copied and pasted with the questions. Because it's not a question. I gotta read it out anyway. I don't know what it is to do with it or why it would be there, but here we go. During World War II, the statistician Abraham Walt took survivorship bias into his calculations when considering how to minimize bomber losses to enemy fire. Researchers from the Center for Naval Analyses had conducted a study of the damage done to aircraft that had returned from missions and had recommended that armour be added to the areas that showed the most damage. Walt noted that the study only considered the aircraft that had survived their missions. The bombers that had been shot down were not present for the damage assessment. The holes in the returning aircraft, then, represented areas where a bomber could take damage and still return safely. Walt proposed that the Navy instead reinforce the areas where the returning aircraft were unscathed, since those were the areas that, if hit, would cause the plane to be lost. Now that was a very clever man. He did have to do a bit of a squirrely thinking to get around to that. Well done. Well done, Abraham Walt. That does have the tone of a Wikipedia article, but I didn't get these. I get these, I just found it on some Christian site. I don't know where I found these questions. But it seems odd that that would be the end. That's not a very Christian-y thing to think, is it? Because it's logical and interesting. Oh, stop it. That was prejudiced. Sorry. That was mean. Sorry. But you will admit it doesn't sound like something you'd find on a Christian site. Maybe not for those reasons. I don't know. Interesting. I guess it's okay to be interesting for no reason sometimes, isn't it? Anyways, survivorship bias. You only have the examples. Yeah, survivorship bias in general. Survivorship bias is if you're only using the examples of the things that made it through whatever process you're trying to understand, then you're going to overestimate certain parts of it and underestimate certain parts of that process. Because you don't know what killed off a whole bunch of people because they're not around anymore to explain themselves. Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know what it has to do with any of the rest of it, but it's interesting. That's it. A bunch of questions about atheism. None of them were particularly interesting. None of them changed my opinion. But I welcome anybody who thinks they might know something or they might have something to tell me that would change my opinion. But I would ask you, for the purposes of time saving, for both of us, if we're going to get into a conversation about it, please, I welcome it. Like, I'm inviting people to do this, to give me your single best reason for thinking that a God exists that somebody outside your mind should take on board. So I'm not going to listen to your visions or the voices in your head or anything. That's no good. Or your feelings, because feelings don't matter. Your feelings don't matter to me. Only my feelings matter to me. You know? And vice versa. Why would my feelings matter to you? I should hope not. At least not in coming together about... not in putting together opinions about the nature of reality. I should hope that my feelings on their own would be meaningless to you. So yeah, please, if you're a religious person, you're listening to this. But it's just Matty. Hi Matty, how you doing? But if you are a religious person and you are listening to this, by all means, I don't know, drop it in a comment or send me a message or whatever, we can get into it. It'll be fun. I'm not going to trash you. I might make fun of your ideas, but I'm not going to trash you personally. I don't do that. So, please do. Please do. Single best reason someone outside your mind should believe in a God. No one's managed it yet, but I welcome the challenge, and I'm looking forward to it, if you feel like you want to do it. And I am